Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Metzia, page 108b. Top of the page with the words Vilo, Iromi Komarim. But if this field is not of any distinct quality, he is certainly trying to employ an artifice. His plan is to then purchase another plot of land from this owner, one that does border on the field of a neighbor. By first buying the plot in the middle, he is trying to establish himself as a neighbor, so that the other neighbors will not have the first right of purchase relative to him. Therefore, neighbors may prevent him from buying the second plot of land. The Gemara continues to discuss the halacha of one whose field borders that of his neighbor. With regard to a gift, it is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor, as one can give a gift to whomever he chooses. A Maimar said, if he wrote a property guarantee to the recipient of the gift that if the field is seized for payment of a debt of the giver, the giver of the gift will compensate the recipient for his loss. It is subject to the halacha of one whose field borders of the field of his neighbor. In that case, the supposed gift has the appearance of a sale, so that the neighbor can force the recipient to sell the plot to him. If a seller sold all his property to a single person, this sale is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor, as the seller is not required to leave out one particular field if the buyer is acquiring all his property. Similarly, if the seller sold it back to the previous owners, this sale is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders on the field of his neighbor. If a buyer bought a field from a Gentile, or a seller sold the field to a Gentile, this purchase or sale is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor. The Gemara clarifies this ruling. If a buyer bought the field from a Gentile, it does not apply, as he can say to the neighbor, it is better for you that I bought the field, as I have chased away a lion for you from the border, since the neighbor certainly prefers having a Jewish neighbor to having a Gentile neighbor. Back in the day, a Gentile neighbor, it was much more, no such thing, a nice, America, we have it pretty good, let's put it that way. If a seller sold the field to a Gentile, the Gentile is certainly not bound by the command of, and you shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord, Deuteronomy 6:18. The Gentile is therefore under no obligation to refrain from purchasing this land. Nevertheless, we certainly excommunicate the one who sold it to the Gentile until he accepts upon himself the responsibility for all damage resulting from accidents that might befall the neighbor on the Gentile's account. The Gemara continues, if he sold the field previously given as a mortgage to the one whom it was mortgaged, this sale is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor. As Rav Ashi said, the elders of the town of Mata Mahasya said to me, what is the meaning of the word mortgage, mashkanta? It means that it resides with the one to whom it was mortgaged. The Gemara asks, what difference does it make what the word means? I think it makes a big difference. Anyway, the Gemara answers, it is relevant with regard to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor, in that the person to whom the field is mortgaged has more rights than bordering neighbors, as he lays claim to a measure of ownership over the land. If one sought to sell a distant field and then to redeem, in other words, purchase for himself a close one, or if he sold a bad one to redeem a good one, this sale is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor. Rather, he may sell his field whenever he has the opportunity. Likewise, If he sells his field to pay for necessities, such as for taxes, for his wife and daughter's sustenance, or for the burial of one of his family members, this sale is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor. This is because the sages of Narda said, for taxes, for sustenance, and for burial, we sell a field without a proclamation, as such matters are pressing and urgent, and should not be delayed out of consideration for the rights of the bordering neighbor. Similarly, if he sold the field to a woman who does not usually chase after vendors, or to orphans, or to his partners, this sale is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor. If various individuals have equal rights to a field, such as both are bordering neighbors, but some of them are neighbors, whose fields are adjacent to his on the side of the city. In other words, the fields are between the city and the field being sold. And the others are neighbors whose fields are adjacent to his on the side of the field. In other words, their fields are between the field being sold and the area further from the city. The neighbors whose fields are adjacent to his on the side of the city receive precedence. If one is a regular neighbor and the other a Torah scholar, the Torah scholar receives precedence. If one is a relative and the other is a Torah scholar, here too the Torah scholar receives precedence. The dilemma was raised before the sages. With regard to a neighbor and a relative, what is the halacha? Which one of them takes precedence? The Gemara suggests coming here an answer from the following verse. Better a neighbor who is near than a brother who is far. Proverbs 27:10. If two people sought to acquire a field, and these coins that the first produces for payment are good dinars, and those coins that the second uses are weighed dinars, which are preferable to the good dinars, sale is not subject to the halacha. One whose field borders the field of his neighbor, as the owner can say he prefers the superior quality coins. If these coins were wrapped up and those were loose, this sale is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders on the field of his neighbor, as he may sell his field to the one whose money is ready to be counted. If the neighbor said, I will go and expend effort and bring money, we do not wait for him, despite his status as a bordering neighbor. If someone else is available who is prepared to pay immediately, and if he said, I will go bring money, we see what his financial status is. If he is a person who is assessed as one who can go and bring money without delay, we wait for him, but if not, we do not wait for him. If the land belonged to one person, and the house and the land belong to another one, the owner of the land prevents the owner of the houses from selling his house to someone else, as he has the first right of purchase. By contrast, the owner of the house does not prevent the owner of the land from selling his land, as one can change his place of residence with relative ease, so that he is not considered tied to the land. Similarly, if the land belonged to if the land belonged to one, and its palm trees to one, the owner of the land can prevent the owner of the palm trees from selling the trees to another, but the owner of the palm trees cannot prevent the owner of the land from selling his land to another. If two people wanted to purchase land, but one desired the land for building houses, and the other wished to purchase the land for planting, the settling of the land through construction of houses is preferable, and this sale is not subject to the halach of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor. Therefore, he may sell to the one who wants to build a house there, even if he is not bordering a neighbor and the other potential buyer is. Okay, a jagged edge of the rock on a row of palm trees served as a barrier between the two bordering fields. We see whether any open space exists. If the owner of the adjacent field can invert even a single furrow there that comes into the contact with the other field, This sale is subject to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor. But if sufficient space for fraud does not exist, this sale is not subject to the halacha of one whose field borders the field of his neighbor. In a case of those four bordering neighbors who surround a field that is for sale from all four sides, if one of them proceeded to the others and purchased it, his purchase is a valid purchase, and the others cannot object. And if they all came simultaneously to purchase it, then they divide the plot of land with which two dissecting diagonal lines, so that each receives a portion near his field. And that concludes the Daf of forgot already what Daf you're in. Of 108, yeah.